Since I kinda had a dig at Doom's tutorial in the last 5-minute hook, I wanted to talk about a couple of different tutorials and kinda compare them. A lot of competitive games nowadays have pretty short and not very helpful tutorials, and I want to talk about the challenges around making tutorials for competitive games, particularly balancing the experience of the player versus the need to learn more in-depth concepts. So to start this off, we are going to do Slap City, which is a game with a pretty decent tutorial actually. When you first boot the game, you get put into a tutorial that looks like this. So basically, this tutorial is only teaching you real basic stuff. So you can move with the stick, you can run, teaches you to jump, teaches you to double jump. The benefit of this, of course, is that you learn things that you need to know to be able to play. So you learn that you can jump and double jump, and you're required to do these in order to get through the tutorial and unlock these little doors. So it's nothing fancy, and it doesn't teach you any competitive aspects of the game. Enter next room for ambush. Oh, I wonder what that is. Yeah, so now you do a little fight with the things you just learned. And it's a very basic tutorial. It's just teaching you the basics, which is much better, actually, than some of the other games I want to talk about today, like Super Smash Bros., which this game is very similar to. One of the interesting things about this tutorial is that, unlike Doom's, it doesn't take control away from you. It just says, hey, prove that you can do this, and I'll let you through. And so you saw me breeze through that tutorial, but for a player who doesn't know how to do it, they're able to be in full control of their character the whole time. And it's kind of better in some ways than having them sit there reading a bunch of text. You know, it's still text in the background, but at least it's not, hey, read this long explanation of a mechanic. It's just press this button and see what happens. So Street Fighter V actually does a pretty similar thing to Slap City with having a tutorial upon opening the game for the first time. And similarly, it doesn't necessarily teach you the competitive aspects of the game. It just focuses on getting you acquainted with the mechanics, which in some ways is kind of understandable. It also does this little story thing, which is interesting. I mean, I guess it's cool. It's probably a bit long. So yeah, it shows you how to do stuff like movement. Oh, I have to dodge a thing. These are not useless things. You do need to sort of know how to do this, but this is not teaching you the competitive aspects of the game. This is kind of a tutorial for the casual player, which is how most players start out actually. So the positive thing about these tutorials is that they don't overburden the player early on. The negative thing about these, of course, is it's actually kind of hard to find a path from here to a place where you are able to play at a competitive level. And for many of these games, that's kind of where the fun is. Street Fighter V also has the unfortunate decision to just put up long text boxes that you have to click through that explain stuff, and it's like, I understand why, but it's not ideal. And now we're looking at the Overwatch tutorial. And the thing that all of these have in common, I think, is that there's room for improvement. There's the potential to teach players not only the basic mechanics of the game, but the actual way that you play them in practice. This one's neat because it has voice acting, but it teaches you pretty meager amounts. Like, it's nice that they teach you the basics of first-person movement, because some players may not know how to do this, but where's the path from here, as a very beginner, to somebody who is playing at, you know, high levels of the competitive rank in Overwatch? This is just so basic compared to what players actually need to know in order to play the game. Like, it's good that the game teaches you these game-specific mechanics, but does this really tell a new player how they're supposed to play the game? The game is teaching you something crucial here, which is actually relevant to how to play the game. You want to capture objectives. It doesn't really tell you why it matters, but it is teaching you how to capture them. So, I'm taking us into Overwatch's real tutorial. Another thing that these games all have in common is that the real tutorial is playing the game and experimenting with it for yourself. Overwatch actually has you walk from your spawn point to the point to sort of teach you the map, which is a little clever affordance. Essentially, you're not going to learn how to play Overwatch from that tutorial, because that tutorial is pretty basic. You're going to really learn from getting absolutely destroyed in quick play. And if you don't get absolutely destroyed, you'll never learn anything. And it is a fun way to learn in some ways, because it allows new players to just go crazy, do things that are, technically speaking, not the best decision, but have a ton of fun with it. And it allows casual players and competitive players to coexist until their skill ranks move each other out of the matchmaking pool. The downside of this, of course, is that there is very little of a path from here to being a competitive player. Okay, so I want to show you one more game that has a similar kind of tutorial to these ones, but is perhaps even more bare bones. I kind of gave these ones a hard time for not teaching you advanced stuff, but this one is a little bit different. This game lacks a competitive tutorial because it has almost no tutorial at all. So I think if you go into the battle menu, you get a little how to play button, which literally just brings up 29 things that you have to read and look at in order to understand how to play the game. They did not have enough development time, so it's hard to attack them for this, but essentially the case is the same as Overwatch, where the way to learn to play is to just start up a match. And this sort of experimentation is fine. It is interesting as well, because I'm criticizing this game for not having much of a tutorial, but Super Smash Bros., the incredibly popular and famous game that started this genre, also does not have any tutorial. It just has a video that you can watch that shows you how to play. So I guess the question then becomes, what does a better version of this look like? And I don't think that the answer is just making longer tutorials. Short tutorials are good because they get the player to learn the basics that they absolutely need to enjoy the game, and then let them go and enjoy the game in their own way. But if games aspire to be competitive, there needs to be a good on-road for players who wish to get to that competitive level, and almost all of the games completely fail at this right now. I wish I had an example that did it 100% right, but I only have games that do bits and pieces right, and possible theories on how it should be done. The gap is often filled by YouTube tutorials acting as a substitute for what the game should probably teach you. These often cover the meta of a game, or the strategic and practical aspects of playing against other players. Stuff like, how do you decide what move to use, or how do you use this specific technique, are covered way better on YouTube than in-game. The issue with these, I think, is that they're longer and less fun than good tutorials. Like, this video from SVB about Overwatch character picks is 23 minutes, and that's only for one class of character. Personally, I think those videos are really interesting, but expecting the average player looking to improve their skills a little bit to watch a 23-minute video instead of playing the game is optimistic at best. The solution I'd like to see is to use the same grammar and best practices used for basic tutorials, but apply it to competitive strategies and techniques. Things like, don't take control away from the player, make the player feel smart for working out the solution, like a puzzle, make it feel like playing a game rather than being sat down in a classroom, and so on. But saying, use these techniques, is the easy part. The hard part is how to actually use those techniques to teach the why along with the how. I think it's clear that a good approach is a story mode style tutorial. For example, a game like Them's Fighting Herds has you learning to do stuff like super jump in order to take the protagonist on her adventure. The benefit of this is that it gives the player an incentive to learn, similar to single-player non-competitive games. If the story's good, you want to improve enough to continue to get the story. And if the gameplay is fun, you want to learn to continue beating the game. Them's Fighting Herds story mode also tutorializes some strategy elements through fights with certain enemies. For example, you're taught about dashing through a fight with a boss who peppers you with projectiles, which teaches you the basic mechanics of how to dash, double tap back and forward, while also starting you thinking about the deeper reasons to use those mechanics by throwing projectiles at you. Like, you might try dashing and go, oh yeah, I need to use this to dodge the projectiles, and then when an actual match comes up, try using them to dodge attacks. I've not actually played the Them's Fighting Herds story mode, so I can't say if it's totally successful in this. I think the really important part of this is whether this idea is developed further over the course of the story, and the story mode isn't even finished, it's just got one chapter. You don't have to teach the player the whole thing all at once, it's okay to just start with a simple tutorial and then develop the idea over the course of the game, so that by the end of the story mode, the player has a more holistic understanding of the topic. The key is really to keep learning fun, because it is fun to learn. but there's pain associated with being bad at something, and that's what we're aiming to alleviate. If you can help somebody understand some of the techniques they can use, why to use them, and how to strategize and come up with solutions to problems, players will be much better equipped to self-select whether they want to become more competitive at the game or stay at their current level, without feeling deterred by a high barrier to entry due to not knowing where to start. I'd like to dig into this topic more in the future when I start making my own games, because I think it's fertile ground for innovation that really helps the player. And if I get around to making that tutorial system for that future game, I'll do videos on what I learned from it on here. As always, like the video and subscribe below, and let me know if you'd like more of this kind of content. I'm trying a slightly different format where I just talk about a topic while playing games relevant to it. There'll probably be something different on the channel in a week or two, as always.